Hi, everyone. My name is Melanie. I am the national spokesperson for the Tiny House Alliance USA, and I am here with Suze today, and we're going to be talking real tiny talk with her. So, welcome, Suze. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience in the tiny house world and your land and what you've got going on? Because you, my friend, have a lot going on.
Well, hello, and thank you for asking to do this with me. This is really exciting. So I guess just a little bit of a background. I'm a city girl who's lived in the country once and had a husband at the time that helped take care of everything. So I really just had to worry about going to work and taking care of the kid and stuff. I didn't have to
Right?
worry about any of the maintenance and all that. But back in 2013, I really started just falling in love with the tiny house movement. And, I was a single mom at that time raising a kid, and I just was dreaming about getting out of the big house and everything else. And I guess it was her junior year that I started thinking, oh my gosh, like, I'm not going to be responsible for that anymore. She'll be off my payroll. And I can finally downsize and do what I've been wanting to do. And originally, I had thought about getting tiny houses and setting up a property where I could have a writer's retreat, all kinds of writing, because I'm a musician too. And I just, anybody that wanted to come, if I had like 10 of them, and then we had a main house where people could come in and run their stuff by people, whether it was reading, novel they were writing or whatever it might be. But then I decided, no, I kind of wanted to be selfish and just start with me and see what
Yeah.
happens. So
It's
I
okay to be selfish too.
started I started following just several different, people and the little TV shows that were coming on. And of course, you idealize all this stuff of what it's going to be like, and how simple things are going to be. And they, to a degree, are simple, but it's hard. A
Yeah.
lot of it is hard. So back in, gosh, 2019. Well, actually, before that, I guess I met you in 2019, maybe at the Tiny House
I
Jamboree.
think so.
Yeah.
Are
And
you
that's when
getting
I was,
feedback on your end?
I am not. Are you?
I'm getting an echo.
Oh,
Oh, but it seems to have stopped now.
okay.
We'll see if it continues on my end. Yeah. We met in 2019, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was
Isn't that
when I
long?
had, I
That's
know,
crazy.
I had just bought my property. So I had a little triangle out here in Texas that I was looking in. It was probably a 250 square mile area, and ran across this property. It was a for sale by owner. It was an easy process. I had called ahead to the city and to the county to make sure I knew that, yes, it's okay to live in a tiny house on the property, because I'd heard the horror stories of people
Right.
all of a sudden showing up and then they're being told, no, you can't stay here. So I did have approval. And I also had, originally it was just going to be me in, the time I loved the elevator house that Anna White had.
Oh
And so I
my
was like,
gosh.
oh, I could do
Because
that.
you and I are the same because that is the first tiny house that I ever saw. And when we started designing Serenitas, it was one of the we backed away from the elevator bed because we thought we just wanted to be off grid.
Right.
And we were like, "Oh, how would we power that?" But it was the first like floor plan. I don't know many people that really I mean, we see that house a lot, but I don't know many people that really like had that as inspiration. I don't hear it very often. So that's so
Yeah,
cool.
that
That's
definitely
the
was my
one.
inspiration.
Yes, yes.
But I also have to say that I have 200+ pound dogs. And so I had to take the space into consideration, even though I've got, the little ranch here that I live on, that they can run around on. One of them is blind, so I've got to make sure it's easy to maneuver and things like that. And then the other's just rambunctious. She's a mess. But um, so I was like, okay, I've got to figure out an alternative, because I don't think that's going to be enough space and be fair to them to have them in that kind of a space. Um, but I had started following Incredible Tiny Homes by that point, and they were talking about, oh my gosh, what was the model? What was that model that they used to call it? They've changed everything, and so I've forgotten a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. But it was the one that they were doing for $20,000 or $25,000 at the time, and it was just
Oh,
the basic.
the
Do you remember?
RJOs.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so I kind of I okay, I'm confusing this story a little bit, but so I originally wanted to do the elevator home, and then I was like, well, I need to figure something else out, but maybe I can get two of those smaller homes and rent them out, and that would be a good residual or well, not really residual, but a good income coming in to try and ease out of the business that I'm in. And
Right, right.
I don't know, it just got in touch with Randy and that whole thing worked out. So I did end up purchasing two of those that I'm still finishing out 2 years later. It's just taking me forever.
I
Um,
don't think people realize how much work when you buy a shell or you buy well, I mean, even if it's a custom built, professionally done, finished tiny house, like when you get it home and add in your extras and if you want to paint or how
yes,
you're going I don't think people really realize like how much work goes into finishing a tiny house. I think I just think it's tiny and it's easy and I'm with you, it kinda is. But like we've done a lot of work on our tiny house too. And there's a lot to learn, like ceiling counters or, putting in this type of window covering, and
yes,
so much has to be custom, and they're homes that you like grow into or rent out and, need to provide certain things, and it can feel overwhelming to be having
it
to do
is.
that. Yeah.
Well,
And
and
I
it was me
think
and my daughter. My daughter was helping me a little bit here and there. Other than that, it was pretty much me trying to do it. And it was, and I will
how
tell you,
much
let me tell you
how
the
much
most.
have you learned?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, first of all, let me tell you something. I had never installed floors before, so I know
Right?
now how to do the tongue and groove laminate floor installation.
Yes.
Yay!
Yes.
I had my dad, I used to go down to my dad's workshop all the time, so he had taught me a bunch of things, but boy, you forget. You learn quick again, but you
Yeah.
forget what's involved.
Right.
Um, I learned that the most frustrating thing that I've had that I've been dealing with is trying to get the white paint onto Southern Pine. And it's like, oh
Paint.
my gosh,
Yeah,
the paint will go on.
paint on pine or paint on wood with knots. It's
Yes.
I don't care how many I've never found it, so if someone listening to this, wants to leave a comment,
I've got
please
an
do.
answer.
Right? I have never found a primer, or it doesn't matter how many coats of paint you put over knotted wood and all the stuff that you're supposed to put over it to sit, none of it works. It doesn't work.
Okay, I found the solution.
Oh,
I
you
did
did.
find the solution. After the fourth coat of white paint I
Oh,
put on,
geez.
and and this is in
Four.
both houses, okay?
4 coats.
Four coats of
That's
white paint, and then I put Kills on because I'm like, well, maybe that'll work, and then put another coat over that, and it didn't work. So then I finally got so frustrated, I texted Randy, and I'm like, dude, you've got to help me. The answer is shellac primer. That's it.
really
Yes, it's white shellac primer, and you put it over the knots, and man, it seals it and hides them. So
okay.
I'm at that point, and now and I've waited like 2 months since I've done it to make sure that it's not going to seep through again, and it still looks good. So we've got
Nice.
that. Yes, but
Well,
that's been the most.
I've gotten the paint to stay on mine pretty good. Like the knots come through, but the paint has lasted and not worn like all my teal. And I
Oh
used
yeah.
a polyurethane based paint to do that with. So if you get a paint, you it needs to say on it like polyurethane infused, and then you can put it on your steps or your ladders or your trim, and then if you're walking up and down it, it's not fading off and wearing down as much, but the knots have still come through that. So it never stopped the knots, but it does help with the wear, and when you go to wash it, like your cabinet, your handles on your doors and stuff, if you
Right.
wash it, that doesn't come off. So that's
That's
the
good
only
to
thing I
know.
found for wear was that poly-based, paint, but I had never and I use shellac on my wood burnings. But I woulda never, like
Uh-uh. Well, it's the primer.
right,
It's not, yeah, so I don't know, and I'm thinking I'm gonna may have to do, like, a light sand over it and then just put one final coat on everything, but
right.
that's really what has been taking so long, is
Ugh.
getting that stupid paint figured out.
Well, you're gonna be a pro because this is
Oh my
your
gosh.
5th time
I
doing it.
know, I know. You think about the man hours that I've wasted doing that. It's just
You know, and
so anyway,
that's the thing is, like, part of this is, because nobody is a pro in every area. You have this
right.
whole tiny house, and, like, you can be good at one thing, and you'll focus on that and get it done, and then all of a sudden you have, like, 3 or 4 other projects, and you're not a pro at those. And you're learning as you go, or maybe you hire somebody or something, but a lot of us tend to do it ourselves
Yeah.
because we're that kind of like a crowd,
Or we're
and we're
that
like,
broke.
we'll just give it a go, and if we screw it up, then what the hell, let's try again. But like, I started with a countertop epoxy on my counters, and it has done really well.
Right.
But, the edge of the counter where it curves over and it comes around, well, we took the epoxy and we kinda took a little brush and, like, brushed it around, and it would drip off, and I put the blue tape under it to keep it on there. It got so thin around those edges from brushing the epoxy that it's peeling now.
Oh
So,
no.
I have, like, on the one side of my counter is really good, but the other side, I'm gonna have to, like, peel it up, sand it, and try to get it to wrap around. And I use epoxy a lot, but not in that way. And it's not like you can just pick up a counter and put it where you want it so it's in the
Right.
ideal spot. So it's like all these things, even if you use a product, like I use epoxy, I understand it. Even if you use it, if you go to use it in a tiny house, it may not even be the way
Different.
you've ever used it before,
Exactly.
and you're sitting there, like, going, "Well, now how do I make can I just, like, stick it to the end of this board really hard?" I'm, like, trying to heat it up really fast so that it'll stay on there. I'm like, "Don't move, don't fall off." It's the craziest mess in all the land. But you learn, and, I've learned some. Maybe it'll work better, I doubt it, the next time I try to fix this. But it's just you just keep learning all of these things.
Well, you're right. It's a lot of trial and error. A lot of it. A
A
lot.
lot,
A lot.
a lot. Oh,
I did
and
learn how to run a septic line to my septic
okay,
tank. That's something new. What else have I
right,
done? That's for the house I live in. So I've got the 2 tiny houses that I'm trying to finish so that
right.
I can Airbnb those and have family come visit and friends come visit. And then, of course, we are where I'm located in Texas, we are right under where the eclipse is going to go over in 2024.
Oh,
So I've already invited like masses of people out here to come camp and stay in the houses and do whatever they want to so we can all experience it together.
yes,
But then my tiny house that I live in is actually one of the park models. I purchased a park model because it seemed to really, I mean, I've got my own business. I'm a crafter, I'm a musician. So, like, here, I'm going to turn this around. They won't be able to see it, but you can. I've got my keyboard in here, I've got my guitars,
nice,
I've got all of it. So
nice.
the model that I got, the way it's laid out, I actually have my bedroom downstairs, which I needed because I'm getting older and I've got a Lyme disease history that affects my joints, so it's hard to get up and down.
Right,
And then I've got an actual, they called it the bunk room, but I've turned it into my office. So that's my
okay.
office and craft room. And then, of course, there's the loft area, which right now is still cram packed with the stuff that I didn't have time to go through before I moved in here. So, whoop. Just another
Well,
one of those projects on that long list.
and you moved, so when did you move onto your land? Because you had some interesting stuff happen with zoning when you moved onto your land. Um, so why don't you tell us how much land you had? I remember there was some stuff you had to do with a fence, right? You had to have a certain percentage
Well,
fenced, or you had to do some.
okay,
I mean,
so I've got just over 5 acres, and I'm out in
okay.
Llano, Texas, out in Llano County. And I had the fencing is more so that I can work towards an ag exemption. So that's what
Oh,
that
okay.
was for. Yeah. But I had called ahead before I even closed on the property back in 2018. It was the end of 2018. I called and spoke with the city planners and everybody you're supposed to talk to. And I was told, first of all, they really didn't have an answer other than, well, there shouldn't be a problem because they had never had this question come up before, which I know a lot of people run into. So I was like, okay, great, because this is what I want to do. I want to have a couple that I can rent. And I want to have one that I can live in. And I just need to make sure that there's not any restrictions and, none of that. Because I actually do live in a subdivision, but it's a huge subdivision, and it's 5 and 10 acre plots of property. And it's, of course, they don't enforce anything out here, so that wasn't an issue as far as the covenants. But the city and well, and I'm right outside the city limits, so the city people gave me a set of information which really didn't apply, but the county people gave me a set of information and said, "Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it." So I went through with the purchase of the property. I purchased the houses, and then when I'm calling to find out what the requirements were for a septic system for the two tiny houses, was told, "Oh, well, you can only have one if you're going to rent it." And I was like, "Wait a minute, that's not what you told me."
Right.
It's like everything all of a sudden changed. And I was told that if I was going to have more than one, that I was going to have to go before the county commission and get approval. And I was going to have the commercial size septic system put in because I was going to be considered an RV park just for having two
Two.
tiny houses. Yes. And so basically, and I probably shouldn't say, say this, but the people at the county said, but what we don't know can't hurt us. And so I was like,
And that's the thing that I see a lot is that when the counties don't have ways to incorporate tiny homes into them,
exactly,
they say, you know what, just you go do you. And that unfortunately is still that gray area, but it does seem that not everywhere, but in some places that they will just kind of leave you alone. And I think it would take a lot of people coming in complaining to them about it before they may step in and try to do something, or maybe one per, I don't know,
yeah,
all of them are different, but there are so many people in that situation where and I've seen it time and time again where you go and you talk to them and they're like, "Yes, yes, yes, you're good." And then all of a sudden like action happens and they go, "We don't know what to do anymore."
exactly.
Because they thought they had an idea of what was happening and then they really didn't. And I know one of the things that I did with my zoning lady, I drove her crazy, by the way. Um, bless
Squeaky
her for,
wheel, Melanie, squeaky
oh,
wheel.
bless her for putting up with me, but because I was like, why? Um, but I kept telling her, I need it in writing. I need you
Uh
to
huh.
put everything in writing.
Exactly.
And the day before we closed on our land, I was literally at her office pounding down the door, like, get this in writing. And her response came back is, because we kind of knew each other at that point, and she was like, Melanie, you're really scared. And I said, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really scared. Like, I own my home. I'm trying to close on this land and buy property here to live. And I don't want somebody coming back in a year because some neighbor is pissed off or somebody doesn't like
Exactly.
me saying I can't live here. And I want it in writing that I'm going to be allowed to stay here. And, she did it not reluctantly. She did it. She had planned on doing it. It was fine. She was like, I promise you'll be fine. It's all good. But there is that true fear when it comes to getting on land with these. Like we get into other places, but the complications of land, there's so many. like
There
it,
are.
and there's so many different stories. So it gets really confusing for them and for us. And I think I remember when we were talking, you said something about like in an old phone call that it had something to do with the hotels in the area
So
were like
my
lobbying.
yeah, so I've got a girlfriend of mine that actually sells park models in the town over from me. And there were conversations happening at that time when all this was going down that people were wanting to not have to rent from the hotels and the big B&Bs that were in town because they were so expensive, and that people were doing things outside of the city limits like this, and it was eating into their business. And so, Bubba Joe sits on this committee, and so is the mayor or whoever. And, they're like, we don't like this. So then a new ordinance comes out, or
Right. And I think that that's part of the Airbnb business too, that or hotel industry and such combating with Airbnb, right? Like
right.
they want the money, everybody wants the money, and so even if you're trying to do something like what you're doing on land, it may not even be zoning restrictions. It may be big business just trying to intervene. Like there's
Squish us. Yeah.
so many ways that they try to block all of the facets of this tiny house world. I think yours was the first time I'd ever heard really hotels blocking Airbnbs on private land like that. But yeah.
Yeah, just using the connections they have to make it more difficult for us, I think. I mean, that's my
Right.
belief. I have not seen anything in writing and I can't verify it, but that was just
Right.
kind of the rumor mill that was going on behind the scenes. So
And usually, it's probably
there's a
what,
little truth in there.
80% true. Yeah. A
Exactly.
lot of truth in that little bit. So,
Oh
now
my
so
goodness.
you've got the 2 Airbnbs that you're gonna rent. You have your tiny house park model. You've got your well and your septic and
Yes.
electric to your property, and you're gonna start renting them when?
I've got
You
to
have a
finish them. That's
you
my
gotta finish
I work a
them.
lot of long hours
So
and
next
so
week, no
I know,
problem.
right?
Yeah.
Honestly, my hope is to have them completed and by the end of March, and I'm going to be starting to work on the website and everything over the next few weeks to get that up and running. So I'm really hoping by spring I will be able to start renting these things
Yeah.
and going from there. But I do want to say something because you were talking about the well and the electric and everything else. You know, I'm a very realistic person and I'm a budget financial. I'm nickel and dime everything so I can make sure where everything's going. And I thought I knew what I was in for when the well was already on this property. And
Okay.
the hookups are kind of funky on it. I'm gonna have to go back and have redone a little bit. And one of the power lines was already run, and the
Okay.
septic for my house was in the ground already. But like I told you, trying to get a septic tank in for it, trying to go through that route, it was going to be so expensive because of the commercial requirements that they were going to put me under. So I ended up going with a French drain
Okay.
for both those houses, and I've got composting toilets in them. Um, but it always, I guess my point is that it always costs more than you think it's going to. So don't think that you're getting it down to the bottom penny when you're trying to, imagine exactly what you want to do on a piece of property like this. It is always going to, and of course, with the way the economy is going and materials and things are going up and up, it costs probably at least, I don't know, a third to half more than what I thought it was going to, like almost double what I thought it was
Yeah.
going to.
Well,
So
and it was similar for us too on our property, cost wise for connections, but a bigger barrier in our area was we couldn't get anybody to come and do the work. We couldn't find anybody to come and actually do the work. And like I'm in a lot of groups in my area and they're always like, I need a plumber, I need an electrician, anybody have anybody? And there's nobody here. Like, so if you want to come work in Buckingham, Virginia, like we've got a lot of work. Anybody out there, we'll put you to work. Like we
you'd have
need
a
some.
monopoly.
Oh my goodness, because the few companies that exist here, literally, if you call them and they just don't want to do the job, they're so busy they won't come and do it. And it doesn't matter how much you're going to pay them, they don't care. They're busy.
I think that's a small town thing. I think it is. Like when you get once you start getting further and further outside of the big cities, that's an issue. I actually, you're not going to believe this. I actually ended up calling Tractor Supply trying to get contractor names because I couldn't find people out here either. And thankfully, we had a big flood that happened 2 weeks before I closed on the property. And so I met a crew of people out in my neighborhood because of that. They'd gotten cut off, long story, whatever. But because of the people that I've met, they actually were the ones that started connecting me with other people because it's just not, you can't, out here, it's not like you can just look it up well, there's no phone books anymore, I guess, but even they don't have, a lot of people don't even have web pages and things like that. It's all word of mouth. And
Yep.
unless you know the right people, it is hard to find and it's hard to find, like you said, the ones that will actually show up. or the
And the
ones that
ones
they
that
don't
are
want to
good,
qualify.
like,
Yes, that are
they may
qualified.
show up, but then, like, is your house gonna catch fire the next week because
Exactly.
they're like, "This all just looks good to me, man. Have a good day." And you're like, "Oh, please, Lord, help me." Like, it's gonna be so bad.
Pay no attention to that lob of wires over there. It means nothing.
Sparks are normal, sparks are normal.
You don't smell anything, I promise. That's just how it smells in this neck of the woods.
It's scary because it's like as soon as you get one, you're like, you don't even know if it's a good one. So not
Yeah.
only plan for spending more money, but plan for it taking a lot longer to get stuff done because
Yes.
even if you can afford it, they may be so busy right now. I mean, I've got a couple friends out in the same area as me trying to do land development, and they're like, it could be 6 or 8 months before we get
Oh
people out there
gosh,
to
that's
actually start
crazy.
doing stuff. Um, so, if you're hunting for land and you're getting ready to build or do the basic land development on it, please, wherever you're at, I mean, get on the phone with the contractors like now,
Yes.
yesterday, because you need to be on their books and you're going to pay more because they're so busy they don't have to lower prices. And it sucks, but you're right.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that's why I learned how to do laying the septic, putting it together.
Right.
Watch YouTubes.
Right.
Thankfully, and that electrical, I won't mess with electrical. But the other stuff I will take a stab at. But some of
Yeah.
it, I mean, look, I mean, I am a girl. Not that that means much because we can do a lot, but
Right.
I can't, there are a lot of things I can't lift by myself, or,
Right.
I just don't have the strength for. So I do have to find people. Thankfully, though, out where I am, everybody, your neighbor is your friend. Like everybody
Yeah.
knows and they cover each other's back for the most part. I mean, there's, a stray here and there that are those
Right.
kind of people, but for the most part, everybody watches out for each other. So,
Girl, I learned how to do concrete. Okay. My butt is out here pouring concrete because I can't find anybody to do it for me. I feel
is
you.
that
Like,
why you did it?
yeah, who's coming? Who's coming to help me? We have
Yeah.
literally pulled apart and repaired our own well. And everybody's like, "Why don't you call somebody?" I'm like, "Who am I supposed to call? I'll be without water for a month if I'm sitting here waiting on them. Gonna pull it out and fix it." Like, and we're learning all kinds of stuff, and you're correct. Like, we have neighbors and friends that are coming and helping with things, and there is a community that exists.
Yeah.
There really,
Well, and you give back to them too. I know I do as much as I
yeah,
can. And so
yeah,
it's a reciprocated kind of thing. People just, I mean, that is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned moving back out to the country where I'm
yeah,
actually responsible for stuff is
right,
that you have to rely on other people. You can't be that self sufficient. I mean, you can be as self sufficient as you can be,
right.
but you cannot do it all by yourself. So
No. Well, you have a Facebook page. It's called Monkey Jack Ranch, right?
I do. I've got one actually for my tiny houses, the Tiny Adventures with Suze. But
Okay.
I'm gonna confess, I have been horrible. I've been so busy with everything else. I have not kept up with a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Um, so
But
yeah,
I'll
but
put it
the
there so if people
okay.
want to come and check it out, and as you're launching your Airbnb business, they can come and, see the progress as it's coming along. So we
And
can
cheer me on, people. Cheer me on.
yeah,
I
let's
need it.
go. It's almost done, so I can't wait to see it. And
Yay.
thank you for coming on tonight and sharing some of your stories with how this all progressed for you. And hopefully it'll be helpful for others along the way to see that it can be done.
I hope
Um,
so. They can do it. They just have to
you
plan
gotta
and
Yeah,
yeah, work
gotta
for it.
work through it all.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and I
Thanks,
look forward
Melanie.
to talking to you soon,
You
and
too.
we will catch up later.
Okay, you take care.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Bye
Bye.
bye.